need to move forward for time-wise. With that, I would like to introduce our track chairs. So what Orlando did was give us sort of an overview of some of the specific or general areas that we are trying to cover with this medical device focus for blockchain, healthcare, and AI in the first year or so. And now we've got 4 track chairs, and we may introduce some more later, but we have these individuals are going to dive a little deeper into specific areas, both with the call for papers, but other things that we're going to be doing are going to be areas of focus within medical devices. So I would first like to introduce Ted DellaVecchia, who is the CEO and managing partner of Symbotix, where he leads digital innovations and reinventions for health systems, academic medical centers, and insurance payers. He's also been around and done an amazing amount of work internationally, bringing together the synergy between Red Hat and IBM Watson Health. And he laid the foundation for some of the Linux for Health efforts that are out there now. Like everybody else who's involved here, he's done a lot more, but I'd really like to give him a chance to dive into this and talk to you about some of the data elements for the data track that we're going to be going through. So with that, Ted, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Sean, and thank you all. Can you hear me, just to make sure, do a sound check?
Yes, indeed.
Excellent, thank you. Hey, listen, it's terrific to join everyone, and boy, I gotta tell you, what a great set of content that we've heard and experienced thus far. So I'm actually humbled to be able to address this group and to follow those that have preceded me. And actually, to even recap, there's been some terrific foreshadowing to some of the comments that we're going to unveil today. So I'm pleased to kick off this morning the data management track as part of this healthcare virtual series. Again, Ted DellaVecchia, and I'm with Symbotix. I've been the CEO of Symbotix for, gosh, going on 14 years now. And we specialize in helping to reinvent operations in large healthcare organizations and also to bring together ecosystems of software organizations seeking to advance care for common good. So today we're going to drill into the data management track, right? I mean, you've heard almost every speaker, actually, I am confident every speaker thus far has mentioned that the challenges of data and how as it relates to healthcare. So our track objective is pretty simple, right? Is to sort of explore how blockchain and AI play critical roles as things evolve, right? We're starting to see, and we'll drill into in a few minutes, the explosion of IoT. We all know the growth of data is exponential and in getting, sort of out of control. And in many ways, we see the technologies that we're going to drill into today extending the ability to actually change new models of care. And we're going to focus on a few key elements here, right? So, of course, the title of our track is Blockchain, AI, and Healthcare AI. But we're also going to talk about the entire spectrum of things, if you will, from enterprise to the consumer, or cloud to edge, right? We'll drill down into some components, data flow and control. We'll take a few contexts here. It's important to take sort of the balanced approach, if you will, take a look at it from a consumer perspective and from a practitioner perspective, because certainly those that are delivering care or in many ways attempting to deliver valued care are actually constrained by, key challenges with regards to data access, and contextual information. And then we're going to actually, make strong references because we have strong feelings and actually some good evidence behind, what the open source community and major tech movements that are underway, the impact that those can have. Our format is basically as Sean and Heather have opened up. Actually, Gora also mentioned we're looking for collaboration, right? It's not just us presenting to you folks for a year. That'll get old quickly and we'll not have anybody participating. So we're actually looking for other experts, other people wishing to learn and contribute and collaborate with us. Those that are involved in implementations, those that are involved in developing theories, data scientists, all the way to consumers. All right, we're looking for challenges against some of the things that we're going to assert this morning. It's okay if you have rebuttals, who doesn't enjoy a good debate? And those kind of debates typically on an intellectual level we think, yield good results. So we're open to that. Extensions and evolutions of our ideas that we will assert this morning, certainly in the form, if you will, of calls for paper. As Gora had mentioned earlier, as our series of events start to evolve, we'll be conducting panels and looking for speakers at these events. So just basically going to kind of set the context, although I think the prior speakers have done a terrific job doing so. I'll probably just reemphasize a few of that and frame the hypotheses. We'll spend the meat of our conversation talking about what the distributed machine learning and AI elements are and how that's affected by blockchain. The data challenges, because certainly most of the conversations, or if not all the conversations here, revolve around data. And again, we'll take a glimpse into some elements with regards to architectures. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but again, the idea is to provoke. And I usually don't have a hard time doing that, but I can provoke and draw some conclusions, provoke from you, the audience, eventually over the course of our series of events, provoke inputs and changes and enhancements to our game plan here. So just to kind of set the tone here, right? I mean, you all have known the elements, the percentages of U.S. that spends the percentage of GDP on spent on healthcare. I think it's like $3.8 trillion now, and it's a huge percentage of our total gross domestic product. And a lot of that has to do with broken business models. The way our healthcare business models have evolved over the last 50 years, albeit highly regulated, have been highly galvanized and compartmentalized. Unfortunately, all the great intentions behind the HIT movement, the ACA, and other, large regulations and government interventions, if you will, those are obviously well intended, but have had, unfortunately, some bad, results, which obviously are unintended. I think some of that stuff has caused us to further galvanize and close out the access to data. And we find many of the organizations that we work with, and we think this is fairly prolific throughout the industry, just have basic problems with regards to just ingesting information, literally just getting to it. So to set the tone here, our hypothesis has three main categories, or three domains, if you will, right? And you'll see them on the screen here. And what we're going to do is illuminate the interrelationships between these three dimensions of data, right? We're going to offer some examples of things that are in place and actually moving forward quite nicely that will eliminate or circumvent, if you will, the obstacles to reinventing care or healthcare, how it's delivered, how it's consumed, how it's managed, and the business models around that. And we think blockchain connected to machine learning AI is absolutely a critical element of this, and that's something we're going to have to sell here, but we're going to have to talk about how it's all connected. So we intend to form a kernel. This is not a full thesis or a full model as of yet, albeit some of the implementations we're going to explore today are underway. And this is evolving as we go along, but it essentially is based on a correlation between the latency of access, use, value, trust, integration, and operability of data, and the challenges that society is dealing with today because of such. Right. So let's go into a couple of things. I have an HBR study in front of me, although somewhat aged. I think it's actually still important. I think Orlando actually just quoted an element of that. It talks about 80% of data scientists working within healthcare enterprises spend most of their time, 80% of their time, just basically discovering and curating or preparing data. 80% of their time. The same study shows that less than half of these organizations that participated in the study are using their structured data, that's the stuff in their databases and what they can glean from transactional engines, right? Less than half of that actively used in making decisions, whether it be, obviously the clinical decisions about care, ongoing care, and also business-related decisions, right? So that us, and again, we're going to go into a systems thinking approach here. So I'm going to talk about business and clinical care. It's interesting. We also see 80%. Another study I'm going to quote here from CB Insights recently showed that about 80% of doctors surveyed. Now they didn't call it Patient 360; they called it Comprehensive Patient Record, right? But we at Symbotix and some of our partners refer to it as a Patient 360. And that includes a lot of the elements that many have already explored thus far during our conversations here today. But 80% of the doctors or clinical practitioners, I should say, that were surveyed suggest that they believe, access to a Patient 360 would be extremely critical. And I think that's one of those, yeah, we get that. Now, 14% of those same people who said that basically say they can only, they're actually having problems accessing only the EHR across care settings. Now, of course, you all know the electronic health record, albeit there are some attempts from some of the larger players in the industry, but they are only a piece of what it makes up the human genome, the person, the biology, the physiology, et cetera, that we all make up, and the complexities related to maintaining wellness across that, our DNA. So here we're looking at a pipeline, a simple pipeline talking about ingesting, curating, modeling, and analyzing AI, right? We suggest here today, and this basically shapes our hypothesis, right? That in order for any breakthrough advancements, and we've seen several already mentioned, Jose, Orlando, and several others have mentioned a couple, but advancements in all three of these interrelated elements must be reinvented simultaneously to obviously adequately liberate the data, but to actually have some of these major advancements that are in the offing, if you will, take root. Right, and what does that mean? Well, look, I mean, so if we can actually enable full integration and operability, that would accelerate access and use, which along the way, we obviously would build value and trust. There's many mechanisms, and this is not a technology problem, right? Many industries are already using this model, if you will, to think about retail. Retail certainly has, even all the way to the extent of behavior modification, the things going on with regards to this model. Right, we're not suggesting that just yet, although lifestyle choices would be nice to help people make better decisions. But initially at the commercial and the enterprise level, we're talking about a few things, which I think many of us would consider holy grails in and of it themselves, right? In reducing costs of care, right? We talk about 60 or 70% of that 3.7 trillion, if not more, is considered by many of the pundits, and our studies and experience have shown is waste. Right, so that's a lot of waste. Think about what we can do to help the underserved and also the chronically ill with some of those funds. If you're talking about the modernization effort that's going along in order for, obviously, to take advantage of cloud computing, which is a terrific advancement on the business and technology side, right, you still need to be able to feed it. You still need to be able to stream data and leverage data as your asset, if you will, if you're going to extend, machine learning and AI, especially as we see things moving to the edge. So a few of my colleagues have brought up, the pandemic. I mean, who can't talk about the pandemic while we're all doing a Zoom call here instead of being in the same room, right? But, one of the things that I'd like to talk about is over the last 9 months, I would suggest, and it's not empirically supported, but I think many would suggest the concept makes sense, that over the last 9 months, we've probably accelerated appetite. We increased appetite, probably accelerated adoption, and actually opened eyes, if you will, by 10 years of evolution at the pace prior to January 2020. We probably accelerated 10 years the movement towards the edge. For example, one of our clients, a large health system, is working with us to actually move up to 70% of primary care interactions to the edge. Now it's called telemedicine. I don't really like virtual health. I don't like telemedicine either because it evokes, using an Apple phone or something like that. But we think a much more intelligent model is on the horizon. And kind of put together a cartoon here that kind of illustrates, utilizing that pipeline, if you will, concept based on a cloud. And if you think about this as a utility, can you imagine the ecosystem that we can build and provide intelligence? And by the way, the knowledge graphs that are depicted in the center of the screen and those little waves, if you take a look here, are just a small sampling. Certainly, as we generate more and more data at the edge, right? And I think some studies are suggesting that 30 to almost 40% in the next 5 years of healthcare data is going to be generated. That means it's now capturable, at the edge or, at the consumer, right? So as we start to see this continue to explode, we're going to start to have things like spun up knowledge graphs. And I've only chosen several that we're working with that allow us to build a knowledge ecosystem. And in an architectural sense, I've highlighted these here because these are probably several that would illuminate probability of having trust elements related to it, like your electronic medical record or your episodic history in a longitudinal manner. If you start to take a look at the population behavior patterns, even at a macro level, some people will be concerned about privacy. Certainly, the determinants of health for an individual play a big role. So all of these things really have an element of trust related to it. And certainly consumers today are not trusting healthcare simply because of its latency, if you will, with regards to digitization to actually do this. So we think we can accelerate this and actually bring together a federated learning edge, right, where you actually start to introduce semantic search capabilities, where in the real time you're having AI algorithms fed by your ML engines, right, for secure and contextual interaction with the consumer. Let's think about the convergence, if you will, of what's going on in the consumer world, right, and what Apple has created with Apple Care. The devices we wear and carry around with us, and it's not just Apple, but most of the mobile devices today and others that aren't, involved in synchronous communications, like, the watches that maintain your health, the statistics and so on. This kind of stuff is really important to create a baseline, if you will, around the human. What's my heart rate? What's my O2 transfer, at health? When I'm healthy, what's my optimum and so on? And that kind of stuff gets captured, if you will, in a longitudinal record in the future, if you consider our model here, right? And then played against, times when there's perhaps, exposure to a pathogen, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about capturing those elements and so on and so forth, but you can actually start to understand, I think Jose started talking about taste. Now, I don't know how we measure taste through a device just yet, but I'm certain someone's going to figure that out. But my point is, we start to get really personalized, really contextualized around the consumer, and then we start to educate, right, both for machine intervention and for human intervention, through this sort of a knowledge ecosystem that's predicated on the data pipelines that we explored a moment ago. Right, here's just a sort of a conceptual architecture. And I actually kind of had this looking a little complex. It's not comprehensive, but I kind of made it complex just to kind of illustrate the fact that blockchain plays a critical role. But I do think, and I think that Heather earlier in her comments started talking about all of the hype cycle, the Gartner hype cycle and so on. I think that when blockchain first came onto the horizon, people considered it sort of a panacea or a silver bullet. And clearly it's not. It is an important element, if you will. The family of technologies are a critical element in the overall evolving apparatus for care, if you will. But in our opinion, that we'd like to assert in this thesis, again, provoking feedback, it needs to be a part of a complete and comprehensive operating system to be optimally leveraged for reinventing care. And then when you start talking about the science of genomics and bringing in your personal DNA into the decision process, which we see once on the near horizon, once we get past the ethical and other moral related concerns, we think this actually has real opportunity to start allowing people to maintain a healthy lifestyle that's based on information in real time. I'd also like to talk a little bit about a concept, if you will, here. That's called operational technology. Right? People consider, information technology, and thus far a lot of the cartoons that I've shown so far and some of the diagrams right here on the screen, start talking about information technology from an infrastructure and architectural perspective. But operational technology, being blockchain in this case, we think blockchain is very unique in that it enables new models of operations, of business, and of care delivery across a continuum that certainly are possible without blockchain, but in a more simplified and cost-effective manner over time. Right? Think about, in a connected, immutable set of links in a chain, if you will. It's why probably blockchain's called this. But if you start to lock up, the right information with the right transactions, the right permissions, and the right security, operating across trusted execution environments where zero trust in certain cases are assured, right? You start to actually become, more operationally free, if you will, to start exploring and deploying new ways to deliver care across a continuum. And we're going to try to tie all this together in a few moments through a sort of a matrix. But we think the convergence of process, workflow, consent, that's all enabled by blockchain, coupled with the explosion of progress that's being made at high performance compute at the edge. I mean, I mentioned Apple before, and certainly that's a major advancement for society, utilizing power in your hand or on your wrist, if you will, or other parts of your body. But think about what the chip manufacturers are all moving towards. And, organizations like NVIDIA and others are bringing high performance compute to single board processors, to very, very small devices, where now you start to bring power, right? You can actually combine all of this information in a timely sense, right, to take action, right? So we think that this becomes much more possible. And when you synthesize data from all of the heterogeneous devices, and then you allow yourself to be able to analyze in real time and take action upon it, we see new models of care now starting to really accelerate. And I do think as this starts to gain hold 5 years from now, we're going to see a whole different game. Okay, so just to sort of set the backdrop here, and perhaps, if you will, the meat of our track and where we're trying to provoke input and ideas. Simple 3x3, right? Sort of went to what many probably relate to healthcare in general is the old triple aim, and I think it has some relevance for this, so that's why I used it. And of course, the three domains of care that we illustrated earlier, and sort of tying together, if you will, the interrelationships between perhaps even elevating what I just mentioned with regards to operational technology. And here's where we're actually calling for contributions. I mean, we certainly know that there are other use cases, maybe more granular, like I've got a list here: supply chain and inventory management, enrollment and provider data, which I think I cover a little bit here, back office functions and payments and data collection, risk and regulatory compliance, research and development. I mean, we want to actually kind of pull that out of the audience, if you will, over the course of the year that our track will be running. And develop perhaps a much more comprehensive model. But let's sort of kind of go a bit further into the model that I've asserted here today so that I can perhaps stimulate more feedback. So I think having blockchain in your delivery architecture uniquely provides the ability to integrate, manage trusted workflows beyond company boundaries. And we know healthcare is now an accepted team sport, where perhaps in the days gone by, sort of done by one or two players in the ecosystem. Now it's a team sport, right, which includes the consumer. Very, very important, right? So as you digitize processes and transactions with that consumer now trusting it, settlement of the transaction, if you will, right, acceptance of that transaction in a private network is sustained. I mean, I think this whole concept, if you will, not to go too hyperbolic here, but I think this means it has the potential to change what you do when it comes to care delivery, right? Not just how you do it. And I think that's the key element of what blockchain connected to AI for healthcare can bring to the table. So just to kind of drill into a few of these, to highlight, if you will, some of our assertions. Right? If you talk about, I mentioned data interoperability, but now you start to actually tie in the transaction, right, with a secure lineage of trust, right, from beginning to end, single source of truth, as we used to call it, right? And I think it's commonly referred to even today. But if you start to actually sync that up with workflow, patient flow, and interactions, whether they be digital or, in human to human, right, that all is synced with the knowledge and the consent for real-time intervention, right? We think this is profound, not just a bunch of words on the screen here, but we think synthesizing and acting on data at the source, right, is really where we're talking about augmenting influence of outcomes, whether it be a lifestyle choice or whether it be a treatment, if you will, of sort of outcomes from a chronic disease that you may be dealing with. So that's integration and operability. Let's go to access and use, right? And let's talk about it from the consumer experience, right? The consumer lens, right? By reducing variables in the flow, right? And that goes along with my consent and perhaps my primary care or my practitioner's consent together, right? If you can sync that up, it's a much more seamless and less complex interaction, which we think has a lot to do with why there might be sort of apathy in the consumer, healthcare consumer world. Right? People are just not able to understand the language. So in a semantic sense, there's challenges. Not able to access or have fear of going to a hospital, which I imagine today is a big thing. I understand that there are many cancer patients, unfortunately, who are avoiding care, right? So that's a problem, right? But when you start to actually aggregate and analyze data in the shape of intelligence, right, you can take actions and decisions in a way the consumer has actually been tuned by the course of other industries in today's modern society. Right, so we think access and use has a critical play here and is effectuated nicely, we believe, through the family of technologies that's referred to as blockchain. All right, so we talked about permissions and consent, but let's go to the other point here and talk about, when you enroll in your annual care programs, right, that somehow seems to get lost in the sauce, right? So there's always the go back and get consent, prior authorization, go back to permission, and unfortunately there's a lot of, I'll just say the word, a lot of bureaucracy baked into the process today, and it's unnecessary because blockchain can, again, go back to the earlier comment about transactional interoperability with provenance, right? In an immutable sense, you can actually track that all the way through the episodes of a life, right? So of a lifetime. So as you start to create more and more data in real time, the value of that information is now increased, right? Because you can access it in real time, right? Because if you think about the value of data without trust of that information, there is no value, right? And if you think about this entire, layer here of the 3x3 that we're looking at now, this is really where it all comes out. For those big tech organizations, for those large healthcare institutions that are currently pursuing a combined systems thinking approach to the three dimensions: integration, interoperability, access and use, trust and value. Right now, we think that they have the opportunity to create wins for everybody. Whereas I think it was Jose, it might have been Orlando, but someone said that really it's a game that no one's winning. Right, and we think that the premise is all based on the access of trusted, interoperable data that's available where and when a consumer actually wants it. So again, we kind of bring this matrix, if you will, to light, in a holistic fashion. Ask for those that are interested in helping us to build this out further. Again, I kind of rattled off several others that I kind of left off on purpose, just to perhaps leave some fodder for others to come forward with. But this is the meat of where we believe we can build major improvements by utilizing what AAA and Consensus Health have actually stood up here with regards to the virtual series of events, actually bringing to bear, if you will, other movements that are out there, connecting into the Linux Foundation for Public Health, connecting into the Care Connectivity Consortium, the CCC. MIT Media Lab has launched several data science related activities, one of which Symbotix is working with. It's called the Data Trust Initiative, and actually we just published a paper with them, and that would be available, if you will, through this series. All building on this, and we wish to continue to inform this, by engaging the upstream community and build this out. So I'm going to give an example here, if you will, for the audience, because some of this may have sounded a little like, well, it's a vision and so on and so forth, and it certainly is a vision, but there's some major activities going on right now. And actually, Sean, and thank you, Sean, for the generous introduction here. But Sean talked about, when I was at Red Hat recently, part of my role was to create synergies with the IBM Corporation out of the Watson Health Group. And together, Red Hat, Watson, and I, we kind of launched Linux for Health, which is effectively sort of an operating system for healthcare. Just to kind of take a step back and go 40,000 feet up, think about the metaphor, if you will, that iOS and the Apple organization uses for their App Store, right? You know, the devices you carry and wear and so on and so forth are all connected through a single operating system or a platform, right? Think about that for healthcare. And that would immediately connote the direct connection to Linux for Health. It is a licensed project with the Linux Foundation. You see the license down below, and the GitHub is also provided. Several Gits connect over to our Symbotix GitHub, where the code is available, and it's obviously in the upstream. But clearly here we have a single platform of business operations, clinical delivery services across an ecosystem, or a continuum, if you will, with trusted interoperability and collaboration, including not just the practitioner and the consumer, but now we start to bring it down to a community level, right, where we have a symbiotic relationship between those that live within a geographically defined region. And this is important. Now we start to talk about, I think Jose even brought up what was going on in New York, or what's going on in other parts that are in isolated communities. Think about if you had the ability to actually track your activities, you know, utilizing things that are already in place through the smart city activities, like hyperlocal, which again I referred earlier by talking about retail's ability to you know, manipulate behavior patterns and so on. Hyperlocal is already plugged in, understanding behavior patterns of people, and we can actually plug into that. So from a connecting into a smart city perspective and actually bringing out the aperture, Linux for Health takes a full community, creates a collaborative model that's transparent, stimulates folks to work together, local businesses, state and local government, you know, DHHS, et cetera, consumers, patients, the lab organizations that serve that populations, to all work off of the same data set, right, which is going to be less complex, much more tuned for the population. Certainly there's, you know, some disparity given the fact that people come and go, but there's typically a community is called a community because folks tend to live, you know, in sort of some state, not too transient in many places. But think about plugging into a utility where you can actually start to, you know, leverage information that's trusted, interoperable, and usable where and when you want to for customer journeys, right? For improving your business capabilities, you know, for actually, again, distributing information relative to your care. It's an operating system that delivers trusted transactions, administers the right configuration so that services can actually prevail throughout. So a real project underway. And again, I kind of voiced an interest in actually engaging with the upstream communities and with the IEEE, you know, and with other agencies that are also contributing to this, right? Like Consensus, like Symbotix, like IBM Watson Health, right? To kind of join forces and make this a reality sooner than later. So sort of, I think, kind of closing up here. I know we were running a bit late, so I'm going to try to do my part in getting us back here. Sort of talking about some key takeaways, right? A competence in a comprehensive and operating system-based data management capability is, we think, the fundamental optimal way to go. We think it is the fundamental problem or obstacle to healthcare advancing to the modern age, right? And we also obviously incent those that are listening and others, whoever actually delivers the trusted comprehensive pipelines that are contextual and meaningful and sticky to a consumer from cloud to consumer, right, can actually monetize the data. Now, there are organizations today that are monetizing it, you know, don't need to mention them. There's several large ones, but they're capturing data and using it for purposes that may or may not be for, you know, the overall health of society. They're doing it for capitalistic reasons only. I don't have an issue with the capitalistic issue, but what we're suggesting, not altruistically, but what we're suggesting is that this become an open project that includes, you know, us, people, society. All right, so let's all get involved with monetizing. And again, going back to that cloud concept for community, imagine the community is actually benefiting from a more healthy population, right? It is the asset, right? We talk about trust equal value, an equation that is paramount, right? Jose brought up, I think, and also Orlando, those guys were kind of tracking nicely. I wonder why. But the fact that real world evidence, think about the definition of what that means, is now a possibility when you start to actually deploy blockchain and machine learning, right, throughout the entire pipeline of data delivery as it relates to care, knowledge, and wellness. And to kind of wrap it all up here, it is critical in our opinion, and we assert in this thesis, that the open communities, right, Linux Foundation, the IoT community, which I sit on the board of advisors, and I also invite others to get inquisitive about that. We're drawing a direct connection into what IEEE and Consensus Health has just launched here from the IoT community for synergies. We think that there's terrific cross-functional gain there for progress. Confidential Computing Consortium, right, where we're looking at TEEs, trusted execution environments, and other pathways that will accelerate evolution of a functional approach to a healthier society today. This is not, rocket science, folks, and this is something that we think is important. Here's the call for papers. We're looking for speakers. All right, what's wrong? What have we missed? Alternative models. And I think I may have provoked a few things in addition to Sean popping up, meaning I probably, like the gong show, need to be pulled off here. So here we go, and call for papers, and I'll stop it there. Thank you very, very much for listening and allowing me to address this group. Good day.
Outstanding. Thank you, Ted. Yes, as Ted noted, we are having a ton of great content, but we're also running a little over time, so we're going to try and move things along. We are going to keep Q&A to just the chat right now, so if you have questions for the speakers, please put them in the chat, and then they will address them as they are able.